Coming up on the Celtics Talk podcast, got my guy, Jay Croucher, the head of trading for PointsBet. He's on to tell us where these Celtics rank. You know, it's award season, and all of a sudden the Celtics, as they're surging up the Eastern Conference, they're in the middle of all this voting for potential awards from, Jayson Tatum in the MVP conversation, Marcus Smart and Robert Williams for Defensive Player of the Year. Is Ime Udoka going to win the Coach of the Year award? Brad Stevens for Executive of the Year, Rob Williams for Most Improved, which would be, of course, my vote if they let me have a vote, but they don't because they know I'm Rob Williams biased and we give him every award. But he's going to help us figure out who has an actual chance to walk away with some hardware. And what about the Celtics themselves? Again, they might be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. Jay's going to help us figure it all out. That's coming up on the Celtics Talk podcast. All right, Jay. The Celtics are relevant. It's baffling to me that if you'd rolled this back 10 weeks ago, we would have been talking about where in the lottery they might land. But now here we are, and we're talking about, will they get the number one seed? But the real interesting thing to me is that as the Celtics have surged up the Eastern Conference, a lot of their players, coaches, executives now muscling their way into some of the potential award season. And still 9 games here for everyone to state their case, but I don't know how much you follow the Celtics and you've seen our coverage, but I have a slight obsession with Robert Williams. So I'm going to start there on the Defensive Player of the Year, all defense, sure, those sort of things. Lead me through this. I mean, do you think that the Celtics have a chance here to get someone to muscle into that Defensive Player of the Year conversation? Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, as the top ranked defense, do they deserve someone in that consideration?
Definitely. They definitely have a real chance, particularly if they get the 1 seed. And then you have the combination of the number 1 seed, the number 1 defense being the hottest team in the league. And I think there will be a real push to reward a Celtic. I think the difficult thing with Robert Williams is that it's very rare that someone comes from nowhere to win this award. Usually you have to be an established defensive superstar. So that's why I think that for someone like Robert Williams or a Jaren Jackson Jr., guys who weren't in this conversation before this year, I think it makes it difficult for them. And that's why in terms of a Celtic actually winning the award, I think Marcus Smart probably has more upside there just because he's known as the leader and the identity of the defense. I think that without as many dominant big man candidates this year, that there will be a bit of a push for a guard to win, and his stats, as always, are excellent. So I think that he's probably the better chance of the Celtics, but I do think they'll hurt each other's cases just because they are close, Williams and Smart. But at the moment, we have Bam Adebayo as the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year, and it's mainly just because when you look historically at what is required to win DPOY, Bam is just the cleanest fit, where he's on a top 5 defense, on the number 1 seed, elite advanced stats. His on-off metrics are fantastic. They're the best defense in the league when he's on the floor, and then pretty average when he's off. So there are a lot of things in Bam's favor. At the same time, he did miss 25 games, but I don't think that can disqualify him just because Rudy Gobert won this award a few years ago in 2018, missing 26 games. So I think there is a bit of a precedent there, and that's why Bam is the favorite for us. But certainly Boston, they have a real chance to get in this conversation, particularly with Marcus Smart, I think.
The fascinating part of it to me is just like you said, the whole notion that a guard hasn't won this since Gary Payton, and Marcus Smart himself has come out and sort of tweeted like, hey, unless your initials are GP, you're probably not winning this thing. What would Marcus, how do you think whether it's just the voters, whether it's people putting money down on these things, what is the biggest way to sway them for Marcus Smart? Is it just the overall team success? Is it them coming out and campaigning for him? Like what really turns the tide of how, people look at him as that potential Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, well, I think there are 2 things. The biggest thing is getting the 1 seed. If they get the 1 seed and all of a sudden they have home court throughout the Eastern playoffs, in addition to being the clear best defense in the league and the hottest team in the league, then they're just going to have such a narrative surge of momentum behind both Smart and Williams. And then I think the other thing on top of that is that the Celtics kind of need to decide who their candidate is, because we're seeing, Grant Williams and Al Horford, they've recently said, we need to talk about Marcus Smart and Robert Williams in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Like, that's probably not going to work. They're going to have to choose one. And I think that it's probably going to be Smart just because he is the vet. He's been there for so long. He's so entrenched as the identity and leader of that defense. And Robert Williams said himself that he would vote Marcus Smart Defensive Player of the Year. So I think those are the two things. There needs to be, a singular candidate. And then if they get the 1 seed, then I think things could really align behind potentially seeing, the first guard since Gary Payton.
It is crazy. I think the Celtics need to come up with some super cut of him defending perimeter players, him defending Joel Embiid, showing off that versatility. When you watch it on a night-to-night basis, it's easy for me to say he deserves consideration there. I think it's harder for a national panel of voters and some who don't only see him twice a year and who maybe see him only when he's diving into Steph Curry's leg and Steve Kerr's yelling at him. So Marcus has got to sway those players as well, those voters as well. You mentioned a Miami possible roadblock there and Bam Adebayo. I want to throw it over to Coach of the Year, Ime Udoka. Again, the turnaround here has been remarkable, getting the Celtics from 3 games under 500 on January 6th, now 17 or 18 games over 500 and pushing for that 1 seed. So when I look at the Coach of the Year rankings, I'm thinking like from the Eastern Conference perspective, Spoelstra, even despite last night and clipboard throwing and all that's going on down there in Miami, Ime, and then out west, obviously Monty Williams with what he's done with the Phoenix Suns. How do you think that's going to shake down? Is that another situation where the Celtics really need to make that late push in order to get Ime a little bit more in the eyes of the voters?
I think so. In a weird way, it's similar to DPOY, where if the Celtics, if they get the 1 seed, that probably knocks Bam out of Defensive Player of the Year discussions, and it definitely knocks Eric Spoelstra out. And so Udoka and Smart could potentially both jump those candidates if that happens. At the same time, even if they were to get the 1 seed, I just think this is Monty Williams' award. I think this is close to done. I think there is the sense that, he should have won it last year over Thibodeau. And I think also they're just so far in front of the rest of the league, and they're not going to have a top 5 MVP finisher. And so there are just so many things that point to Monty. I think the fact that, that they kept on going when Chris Paul fractured his thumb and has missed these 15 games, the fact that they've just continued to surge and haven't lost any ground in the 1 seed and the best overall record in the league, I suspect it's probably Monty's award to lose. But at this point, I think that Ime is actually the most likely coach to finish second, just because he's done such an incredible job. His coaching as well is very identifiable because they play such a unique brand, particularly defensively, where they're switching everything. And also the fact that they just changed their basically their level of play entirely mid-season. Have to be obviously some coaching aspects to that. So Ime, I think, is probably the best bet at this point to finish second.
It's crazy. If Monty had just got the award last year, maybe that opens the door even more for
exactly.
Ime. But the voters got it wrong, rewarded the big market and Knicks and their surge. And clearly you watch this year, they didn't deserve it. So just another reason for the Celtics fans to be mad at the Knicks and muddying up this Coach of the Year. I do wonder, it's funny because it's so many of these awards feel narrative driven. And that's why, again, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have been sitting here 10 weeks ago telling you that I thought the Celtics would be in any of these conversations. Now, I got people coming at me and saying, is Brad Stevens executive of the year? And, like 6th man of the year, they got to find someone now. I'm like, man, we're talking about all these things. I don't know. Is there a line out there for executive of the year? Is there, do you think, even if there's not, do you think Brad Stevens should be in that consideration based on, first year on the job? There's always, especially with coaches and executives, I always feel like there's a sort of voters like that first year story, a guy who just takes over and even if it's not getting them to the highest level, delivering them to a lofty stage.
Definitely. I think Brad Stevens has as good a case as anyone. And, it's not that long ago at the trade deadline, or maybe a little bit before it, there was talks of trading Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum or Marcus Smart, which now looks absolutely ridiculous because the Celtics, right now they look like the best team in the Eastern Conference. And you look as well at the things they did around the margins, like getting Derek White was such a huge move. It just was the last kind of piece of the puzzle that they need. I think Derek White, despite the shot not really falling, he just fits in there so perfectly as another elite defensive player and another ball handler. And you look at, what the team has gotten out of, someone like Grant Batman Williams, where he has now become Gotham's reckoning. He is this incredible piece that is coming off the bench. And, I saw him in person in Denver the other night. He looked absolutely amazing with some real pace and burst. And he's also he's firing away now. There's no hesitation on his jump shot, which is huge too. So yeah, I think with the team building that they've done and the way they've gotten themselves in this position where, it didn't look like they would be in this conversation at all a couple of months ago. I think that Stevens, has as good a case as anyone for executive of the year.
I don't want to start just creating random props for you guys. But I do think if we could do one that's like, will Batman stick as Grant Williams' nickname? I'd probably put, minus 1,000 on no, because we've had Brad and Jayson Tatum and even Jaylen Brown come out and say they don't think that one's going to stick. But, his whole vanquishing of the Joker for one night at least brought it up in conversation. You saw probably the highest level of Grant Williams possible. So but I would say Boston fans would have a field day with those Super Bowl like fun props. Let's take a quick break from our conversation with Jay to tell you about PointsBet's new exclusive feature, live same game parlay for NBA. For the first time ever, build the perfect live same game parlay only with PointsBet. Combine your favorite bets anytime during the game, including spreads, totals, player props, and more. Download the PointsBet app today and start betting in seconds. New customers use the code NBC2K to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. So what are you waiting for? It's time to elevate your live betting game. Once the game starts, don't just bet, live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Let's steer the conversation to the real Batman of the Celtics team, Jayson Tatum, slowly crawling up that MVP conversation. I was looking at the odds and, even as far back, again, no one would have had him in there. His cold shooting to start the year. It would have been tough for me to think that he could be maybe in that top 5, top 7 category for voting, but here he comes. And, what do you think? Is there value in considering Jayson Tatum for that award again? If he finishes super strong, a couple of Eastern Conference Players of the Week awards here, will he get the consideration when you're going up against the likes of Jokic and Giannis and Joel Embiid?
Yeah, well, listening to the MVP chants at Ball Arena break out for Jayson Tatum in Nikola Jokic's building, there certainly was that sentiment, and he is, for all the talk about how well Robert Williams and Marcus Smart and Grant Williams are playing. Like, the reason the Celtics are in this position is just Tatum is playing like a top 6 player in the league. And look, I think in terms of actually winning MVP, I don't think that's going to happen this year just because, the first half of the season, he was shooting 42% from the floor, and the Celtics, they started so poorly. And it's just the caliber of candidates this year with Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis. I think it's going to be too much for Tatum to build that momentum this late in the piece. What I will say, though, is that if the season started 2 months ago, I think Jayson Tatum would be favourite to win MVP right now because the Celtics have gone 23-4. He's basically been shooting 50, 40, 90, averaging 30 a game, 7 boards and 5 assists. He's been as good as anyone in the league over that period. And I think that now we're looking at a guy where I would be surprised if Jayson Tatum doesn't win an MVP at some point in his career, just with the level that he's playing at now and what he's shown. I don't think it's going to be this year, but I do think that he will finish top 5. I think that he's gone past DeMar DeRozan, Stephen Curry, and he's right there with Ja Morant for that 4-5 spot behind those big 3 of Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis. But, the important thing is the playoffs, and going into that, he's playing as well as anyone.
Yeah, I got to admit, I've been on PointsBet slamming the refresh button, trying to get my 2022-23 futures. I don't know when y'all drop those, probably right after the season finishes up. But I'm curious because I think there will be heavy momentum for, just as you said, like I would say Jayson Tatum would be a great bet moving forward in terms of what he's shown this year. And just like you said with Robert Williams, it usually, in order for these guys to muscle into that conversation, it feels like it takes a little bit of proof. And then, okay, he was a top 5 vote getter last year. Now I feel comfortable that he's on that pedestal. We'll end on this. Where can I crowbar Jaylen Brown into something? I don't know. Last year was probably his most improved. I just feel bad because Jaylen always seems to, to keep going with the Batman Robin motif. He's been really good, but Jayson Tatum has been so otherworldly that he sort of blends in with what they're doing. Can any of these Celtics guys make a case for most improved? I'm trying to think what other awards are out there that we can crowbar some Celtics into.
Yeah, I think the other one and he's not going to win it, but Robert Williams should be more in the discussion for most improved player because that award is so much just about the leap in points per game. And in that aspect, he's not setting the world on fire, but in terms of him going from, just a solid rotation player to a guy that we're talking about for defensive player of the year and a defensive linchpin on a team that is one of the five most likely to win the title. That level of improvement is, more impressive arguably than going from 15 points a game to 21 points a game. So I think that, he will be on some ballots for most improved player. Suspect that Ja Morant is going to win that award just because his leap from slightly borderline all-star to potentially a top 4 MVP candidate. That's the hardest leap to make. And he's getting all the attention. He's very short now with us to win that award. So I suspect that Robert Williams won't win, but he'll be on some ballots. And then as far as Jaylen Brown goes, I think his market is Celtics to win the East, Celtics to win the title. Those are the things that, he's going to contribute to. I will say that the one concern about Boston is that, I remember the end of the Dallas game a week ago where it starts to get a little bit stagnant late and it seems like it's just all Tatum. There's probably a little bit too much Marcus Smart on offense involved in these late games. And so the ability for Jaylen Brown to really step up, and be that 1B to Tatum's 1A, that's probably going to be the biggest swing piece in terms of whether they can, go and win the East, which now is a serious possibility.
All right, well, I got to finish on that. Have you seen a team go from I don't know what the Celtics odds were on January 6th, but to go from where they were at that point in the season to where they are now and again, making this search. Have you seen a team like that in any sport across the board?
Man, it's difficult. The first team that comes to mind is actually the Celtics back in, was it 2010, where they were like a 500 team. And then all of a sudden, I think from the 4 seed, they went and made a charge to the finals before losing in Game 7 to the Lakers. But that team, though, did have the pedigree where they'd won in 08. They probably would have won in 2009 if Kevin Garnett didn't get hurt. So, look, these runs do happen. The one thing about the Celtics is, what I always kept in mind is that it wasn't that long ago that they were in the bubble and they were favored in the Eastern Conference Finals against Miami. And that core of Tatum, Smart, and Brown was still there. It just wasn't working. And now it is working. And they look, as intimidating as any team out there.
Well, if you're seeing a lot of refreshing from Massachusetts, it's me, because I'm fascinated by the fact that the Celtics are in all these conversations now. Jay, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right. No, I didn't pay Jay to say that Robert Williams should be in the most improved player conversation. I mean, I think it's actually, if you go from where they were last year to where they are now, Ja's leap isn't as impressive to me as Robert Williams going from an oft injured, not even a starter, like getting a handful of starts along the way, but to now being a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate, an all defense guy. But as Jay said, Ja made the toughest jump of all, something we're seeing from Jayson Tatum right now, where you go from an all-star to an MVP candidate. And so I'll be interested to see, I wonder if some people would even consider Tatum on there, but if you're going to go with one Boston guy, probably should be Rob. Just to wrap up here. I mean, Celtics are in the middle of a 3-day break, and I think Celtics fans are torn. They're playing so well that you'd probably prefer to see them just keep riding this momentum, coming back from a 4-game road trip after sweeping everybody out west. They come home and absolutely obliterate the Utah Jazz, hold them to under 100 points, 22% beyond the 3-point arc. The Celtics are clicking on all cylinders. And the couple of things that's just jump out to me is, one, everyone has bought into their role. And it's clear there is just like on a night-to-night basis now, where before it was like the starters would go out there and when they're healthy, things would go good, but then the bench would come in and things would get muddy and there was no reserve units that you could really lean on heavy. Now you can throw Jayson Tatum and the bench out there and the 4 guys, Grant Williams, Daniel Tice, Peyton Pritchard, and Derek White, and they're getting good returns. And so now there's not that drop-off that was happening. And Tatum has just been otherworldly. I know he's going to probably maybe muscle into the top 5 conversation for the MVP, and he deserves to be there based on the way he has carried this team in large part. Now, everybody deserves their kudos for getting this thing on the right track. Rob and Al have been amazing defensively. Same with Smart. I mean, Smart on the offensive side, really embracing the point guard role. The Celtics offense has been absolutely humming since he came back from COVID on January 23rd. Jaylen Brown has been great. He sort of figured this role out here. And now it's like the finisher where, before him and Jayson were trying to figure out like playmaking and, having the ball in their hands. But now the offense sort of starts with Marcus and Jayson, and then Jaylen is there to really make it hurt, especially in transition. Just feels like, again, everyone is sort of bought in. And now you got guys coming off the bench, and Derek White isn't even making shots yet. But this thing is just really on another level right now. And it's funny to see Celtics fans. The biggest concern right now is, well, where should they land in the seedings? Could getting up to 2 be bad? Because all of a sudden you bring in the Nets and full-time Kyrie into the mix of potential matchups. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, but I've made the case. I think the Celtics need to push hard here to the finish line. Before I was very much play the game, like start jockeying. Maybe that 4 seed is the sweet spot. Then you're playing Chicago or Cleveland in round 1. And then you get Miami and their clipboard throwing in round 2. And, all of a sudden you don't see Giannis, Embiid, or Durant through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But now I just think it's the opposite. I think instead of being the team that's sort of like feels like it has to get to the right spot, it's everybody else in the Eastern Conference that is trying to avoid the Boston Celtics based on the way they're playing, because they've clearly been the best team in the Eastern Conference and by quite a large margin. Now, give credit to Miami for what they've done and still being a game and a half up. But there's a head-to-head battle next Wednesday night. The Celtics can make up a game there. And they're 2 games back in the loss column right now because Miami hasn't played as many games. But Miami, again, having that little sideline flare up. We'll see how they respond. Does that motivate them? Does that help them? Do they rally around it, or do they come unglued a little bit? Losing to the starless Golden State Warriors the other night was not a great start as they start to move on from that. But Celtics schedule is daunting through the end of the year. A couple back-to-backs here, both finish on the road, once in Toronto, then they got to go play Chicago and Milwaukee midweek in April there before finishing up in Memphis. I do think you can play the game a little bit with that Memphis game, see where you're at. Maybe Memphis downshifts because they've got locked in. Maybe that's an easy win for you if you need to win it. Maybe you throw out the Sam Hauser, Malik Fitz lineup if you need to potentially make that game a little bit more interesting if you're jockeying for seedings. But I think for right now, it's just keep that foot on the accelerator. Maybe you find spots to rest Al a little bit down to the finish line, depending on, again, how this all shakes down. But I think the Celtics have shown you don't want to lose any of this momentum as they are cooking along right now. And if you go back and rewind these podcasts to early January, I could not have imagined that we would be talking about this. So I will continue to stress it, just embrace it, because it's been a lot of fun to watch. And it's amazing that we can have a segment with PointsBet and talk about all these Celtics in the running for awards, when I'm not sure I thought anybody, again, I thought maybe we'd have Jay on to talk about, should the Celtics, what are the lottery odds of them bouncing up to number 1 and getting this draft pick, or number 5 or 10 or whatever. But no, now we're talking about number 1 seed in the East and potential little playoff run. So while you're checking out PointsBet, just to see how good that action might be, because I think the Celtics are a pretty good chance right now to muscle into those categories. I need you guys to go like, subscribe, check us out on the YouTube page. Enjoy the little break. I know, and remember, games will be back up on Sunday night. Timberwolves coming to town. Celtics got a little revenge on the mind after losing to the G League Wolves, Greg Monroe and all those guys out there in December. Again, shows you how far this team has come. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk podcast.